go. Okay, hello guys and welcome. I've come into the side deck in the middle, which isn't a good start. Let me go back to the beginning of this presentation. There we are. First of all, can you give me a thumbs up? Just let me know that you can see the slide deck. Yes, we can. Good. So away we go. So welcome to this finance masterclass, module one of 8. The purpose of these masterclasses is to share with you financial literacy. And in fact, by the end of this masterclass, you will know more than 95% of business owners. And really, in order to do that effectively, we're going to have to start at the foundational level. We're going to have to lay a solid foundation. And that's what this first segment, this first 30-minute segment is all about. It's about Finance 101. So for some people, this will be new, but for some people, this will seem quite basic. And so just speaking to you, first of all, because I need to kind of get us all on the same level for us to progress throughout this course. If you say that this is quite basic, I'd challenge yourself to ask another question. I'd challenge yourself to say, if it's basic, why am I not applying it in my business? Why don't I understand my numbers? And also, I find in the businesses that are the most advanced, that can grow the quickest, is where the business owner is able to impart this knowledge, this information with their team, right? So the team are empowered to understand how the business operates and how to operate profitably. So we're gonna go through this now. I'm gonna take you through the slide deck, and then we'll do open Q&A at the end. So probably the one of, if not the most financially illiterate man on the planet today is who? It's Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett said, if you can't read the scoreboard, you don't know the score. And if you don't know the score, you can't tell the winners from the losers. I believe that accounting is the language of business. And I think that for most small business owners, bear in mind, they start flat out broke. Sorry, not just start, they stay flat out broke. Okay, they're running around like headless chickens. In a best-selling book, it's also been said as turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is king. And by the end of this presentation, you're going to know exactly why. So I think it's critical, if you're going to win at the game of business, you must understand how the numbers work to have long-term success. It's not hard to have a temporary spike in sales and artificially feel like you're winning. But the goal is not to get rich quickly. The goal is to stay rich. The goal is to have a sustainable business. And I don't know how you do that if you can't read the scoreboard, if you can't get the feedback loop to know if you're winning the game. And yet most small business owners do it all the time, and that's why they stay broke. So it's not enough just getting the numbers, right? Everybody on this call has got an accountant. You might have a bookkeeper. You might have a financial controller. And you might be getting management reports, statutory accounts. You've got to know what they mean. I'm in favor of delegating tasks, but I'm not in favor of abdicating them. And if there's one thing that I'm certain of, Ashley, it's this: nobody cares more about your money than you do. Just this week, I saw an absolute clanger. A private client, somebody in one of my mastermind programs, shared with me their accounts, and their accountant had given them some shockingly bad advice. They'd overlooked something that was going to cost the client upwards of 10 grand. A very, very simple mistake. And by the way, does the accountant know better? Yes. The fact is, he's doing 75,000 different things. And somewhere there was a miscommunication, and the client got the wrong end of the stick. And if he hadn't been checking through his numbers and said, Dan, what do you think of this? Does this make sense? And I went, hell no, it doesn't make sense. You need to fix it. If they hadn't had the smarts to ask the question, to understand what the numbers meant, they would have made a mistake that cost them upwards of 10 grand. Okay, you've got to know what they mean, and that's what this first module's about. Knowing your numbers equals knowing what to do, Steve. Okay, Graham, it gives you the map. It gives you the map. It's the language of business. It tells you what to do. It's the feedback loop. So in this first module, we're going to talk about the 3 financial scorecards. We're going to talk about what the 3 scorecards are and the component parts of each scorecard, and finally, how they interrelate. Everybody on this call has heard the expression, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. But very few people know actually what it means. And the skill of this is making it simple so that you can understand it, so you can apply it, but you can also share it and empower your team. Okay, so 3 financial scorecards, Simon. You better know all these, otherwise I'm going to unmute you and call on you to fill in the gaps just to keep you on your toes. So there are 3 financial scorecards. Let me just flick down. I see all your beautiful faces, but I don't know everybody's name. So I will welcome. The first one, Craig, is a profit and loss statement. Profit and loss statement. Okay, most people have heard of this one. By the way, accountants have got a tendency, a really bad habit, Alistair. They've got a bad habit of using 7 words when 1 word would do. And they'll often use a lot of different words that mean the same thing, Gary. So I'm going to deliberately use a lot of words and try to illustrate them, get you comfortable with a different language. Because I don't trust any profession where they get paid more for having the client fail to understand it. The legal profession is one of those, and the accountancy profession is another one. They make it complicated, so we don't understand it, so we just abdicate it. And we go, oh, I don't get it. So the profit and loss statement is also known as the P&L. It's also known as the income statement, and it's occasionally known as the statement of operations. Okay? So, Alan, that's the first one. The second one is the balance sheet. The balance sheet. Most people have heard of the first one and even understand what it means. Most business owners have heard of the second one, but they couldn't explain it to you. I was speaking with a business owner just this morning who has a multi-7-figure business, has had it for many years, and makes, good, solid 6-figure profits. But they're limited, or have been limited, or were getting limited in their growth because they don't understand balance sheet. My experience, if you're at 6-figure revenues, the difference between 6-figure and 7-figure revenues, and definitely the difference between 6-figure and 7-figure profits, is understanding the balance sheet, but also this third scorecard, which very few people know, which is the statement of cash flow. So this is your holy trinity, Graham. There are 3 scorecards: profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and statement of cash flow. They're your 3 scorecards that would make up your management accounts. So if an accountant gives you management accounts, it would normally be comprised of these 3 parts. And this is telling you what has happened in the business in the past. Okay? These are the 3 scorecards. Now, helpfully, each of these 3 scorecards, Alison, has 3 component parts. Okay? They'll like to tell you, Graham, that it's got 76 component parts, but I'm telling you there's only 3. There's only 3 that matters. If you can remember the 3 scorecards and then remember the 3 parts of each, these 9 bits of data, you will be head and shoulders ahead of the rest. Everything, almost everything else is noise. Or it's noise and it's a distraction if you don't understand these 3 scorecards. If you know these 9 words, you will have the cornerstones with which to have any good financial conversation. You'll be able to hold your own with an accountant. You'll be able to hold your own with a bank, with a finance director, if you understand the definitions and the 3 component parts of each scorecard. So let's talk about the P&L first. So you can tell me in the chat, you can tell me even though you're muted verbally, I can see your mouth's moving. What are the 3 parts of a profit and loss statement, a P&L? The first one is sales. But accountants might call it revenue. They might call it turnover. Okay, sales, revenue, turnover. Okay, right, that's what's coming in from when you've sold something. The second category on a P&L is expenses. Now, there's a lot of different subcategories here, Alistair, as you know. So people talk about COGS and direct costs and indirect costs and overhead. For now, just know that it's an expense. Because to a certain degree, it doesn't matter how that expense is categorized. If you've got revenues and you take off expenses, Alison, you're left with the third category, which is what? Come on, play along with me. Somebody at least mouth it out loud. Yeah, there you go, Gary. Bonus points for you. Profit, sales, expenses, and profit. Okay, we're going to come back to this and I'm going to illustrate it with examples, but I just want to get us on the same page first. Sales, expenses, and profit. Okay, now let's talk about the balance sheet. Let's talk about the balance sheet. And once we've got these terms on the table, I'll illustrate it with some examples to bring it to life. So a balance sheet is critical and it tells you 3 bits of data, none of which you've got on your P&L. It's 3 different bits of data. Okay, Martin? So the balance sheet, well, you know very well, that the balance sheet is like what's more important to the human body? Your heart pumping, your lungs breathing, or your brain functioning? Which is more important? We've got a physiotherapist, which is, I don't think we're going to doctors on the line, but we've got a physiotherapist on this call. Which of those is most important? And some people, if push, might take a stab, but of course, the truth is they're all interrelated. And the same is true with these 3 scorecards. So the P&L tells you sales, expenses, and profit. The balance sheet tells you 3 things. Firstly, it tells you assets. Assets. What are assets? Things and stuff. Okay? Things and stuff. The person that taught this to me, a guy called Keith Cunningham, would say it's things and stuff. So you've got equipment, you've got buildings, you've got stock, you've got cash, you've got accounts receivable. This is all examples of things and stuff you can have, okay, that your business can own. The next category is the opposite of assets, and that's liabilities. Liabilities. What are liabilities? Another word, almost a synonym, would be debt, right? And there's 3 categories of liabilities. There's taxes that you owe. There's borrowed money that you owe. And then there's trade creditors that you owe, suppliers, okay? But regardless, all of those things are underneath the category called the liabilities. It's stuff that you owe. It's stuff that you owe. Assets is things and stuff you have. Liabilities is stuff that you owe. Money, ultimately, that you owe. Debts that have to be repaid. And the final section on the balance sheet is equity. You hear people talk about, how much equity have I got in a house? Or you hear people talk about a relative synonym is what is somebody's net worth or net assets. But I'm going to illustrate that in a couple of slides time. And so don't worry at the moment if it's just words. I'm going to illustrate it with a real life example that will help you understand something that I've had somebody go through this slide deck that said after they went through it, they said, I learned more in that one presentation, Dan, than I learned in the finance modules on an MBA course. Okay, so I'm going to make it simple because having complexity isn't helpful if you don't understand it. Okay, so the balance sheet tells you assets, liabilities, and equity. Final scorecard, okay, is the statement of cash flow. Turnover is vanity, profit sanity, cash and cash flow is king. Profit and cash aren't the same thing, okay? So what we're going to talk about on the 3 parts of this scorecard aren't spoken about, Gary, on the P&L. They aren't spoken about, Graham, on the balance sheet, okay? These 3 factors, Steve, Rachel, are different parts, and they're all variables, going back to this metaphor of health. 3 variables related to your brain function, 3 variables related to your heart function, Simon, 3 variables related to your lung function. All right, I'm pretty sure they're all damn important things. So if you want to get clued up to the health of your business, the financial health, Ashley, you better get clued in. So there are 3 types of cash, and not all cash is created equal, Ashley. The first is operating cash. Operating cash. Said simply, operating cash that comes in to your business comes from customers. Operating cash that goes out of your business goes out to pay expenses to do with running your business, delivering that service. Okay. What are the other 2? Well, the second category is investing cash. Investing cash, Simon, and it's very applicable in your type of business. Okay, Simon he's got a few interests, but he owns a multi-location estate agency in the Southwest. Okay, what is investing cash? Investing cash comes from and goes to the buying and selling of assets. Right, Ashley? So an example would be, if you take £100,000 and you go and buy £100,000 house for cash, your bank balance goes down by £100,000. But in exchange, you get a load of bricks and mortar worth £100,000. So in other words, that doesn't show up on your P&L. It doesn't show up as a £100,000 expense that month because you've just exchanged your cash for bricks and mortar. And equally, if the next week you went, Simon, I've made a mistake, I want to sell this house, and he sells it for £100,000 cash and without any fees, Simon, because he's generous like that, and you get £100,000 cash back into your bank account because you've sold your bricks and mortar, your bank balance has gone up by £100,000. But it doesn't show up on your P&L as £100,000 of income because it's not. You've just turned your bricks and mortar back into cash. So that's investing cash flow. Okay. And the third category, Rachel, you know well, is financing cash. Okay. Financing cash. What does that mean, Steve? It's what we were talking about the other week. It's the borrowing and repaying of debt. If you get a £100,000 loan, okay, you got C-bills or you got bounce back and the money's landed in your accounts, your bank balance actually has gone up by £100,000. Okay. But does that show in your P&L, Graham? Of course it doesn't. Alison, equally, if you take £100,000 and choose to pay off the loan, you say, you know what, I want to settle this loan. Okay. Your bank balance goes down by 100 grand. But does it show up on your P&L? No, it doesn't. Because you've just repaid a debt. Okay. So the statement of cash flow, all cash is different. It falls under one of those 3 categories. And the most important of those 3 is which one, would you guess? Alistair, which one of those 3 is most important to all businesses all the time? Right, operating cash flow. Okay, but they're the 3 scorecards and the 3 numbers. Okay, so let me now illustrate it with an example for each. Let's now make it a little bit more real. Okay, let's make it a little bit more real. So profit and loss, or it's abbreviated to P&L up here, or my American friends will call this an income statement. Okay, don't worry about the different categories of sales or expenses or profit. Don't worry about that for now. Just know which of the 3 buckets it falls in under. Let's say in a month, Graham, you had 100,000 in revenue. Let's say, Gary, you had £80,000 worth of expenses. Okay, and indulge me here. I know this is overly simplistic, but you'll see as we go through this course, it gets more complex and we come back to the first principles. How much profit do we have? In this example, you can have £20,000 profit. Okay. That's what a P&L. It might have 17 different examples of sales and 97 different expense categories. And that's where people get lost. But ultimately, it boils down to what is your net profit? What is your net profit? Okay. We might get joined by a 6-year-old for a finance masterclass in a moment. The joys of working from home. Okay. So let's talk about the second scorecard. Let's talk about a balance sheet. Okay. Quickly, you can have a quick wave and then you've got to go. That's India. Everybody wave hello to India. Okay. I love you. Okay. Going out. Thanks, Summer. I've got 3 kids, just, you know, as a little interlude. And they are 10, 9, and 6. And they understand when daddy's on the call, yeah, don't interrupt daddy, he'll come out when he's done. The 10 and 9-year-old get that no problem. The 6-year-old knows that clearly those rules are invented for my brother and sister. They do not apply to me, but that's a side point. So back to our balance sheet. There's 3 parts: assets, liabilities, and equity. And I'm about to rock your world. You're going to learn, months worth of business degree knowledge here. I've figured out a very simplistic way to explain this. Accountants make this needlessly complicated. You just need to know, whatever your accountant's talking about, which of these categories does it fall into. So I'm going to illustrate this, Graham, with one transaction, okay? Let's pretend we have a buy-to-let property business, okay? And let's pretend we own one house, okay? That's an asset. So we buy a home, and we buy that home for £100,000, okay? That's an asset, okay? It's things and stuff, Alison, okay? So it's got some worth, right? It's an asset. So it goes in the asset column, okay? That's the left-hand side of the balance sheet. The right-hand side of the balance sheet says, do you own that asset or do you owe for that asset? Let me show you what I mean. So we have assets of £100,000. We now have to say, well, do we own that asset or do we owe for it? Well, let's say we have a mortgage, Graham. If we had a mortgage, and that mortgage, yeah, which is a loan, a mortgage is a type of a loan. If we have a mortgage for £80,000, okay, the left-hand side of the balance sheet says, added up together, we've got £100,000 of assets in this company. The right-hand side has to add up to 100,000 in total. So if we've got a debt, a liability, a loan, a mortgage, it's the same thing, of £80,000, how much equity do we have in that home? How much? I know it seems obvious. Most of you are mouthing it. You've got it. It's £20,000 in equity. That's how much equity you've got in that business. Now just play with me, right? Because trust me, this is useful to come back to when this gets more complex. And most people miss this and they get confused and they go, oh, this is too complicated, I don't get it. Whenever you take it back to first principles, this is it. If we bought the house in cash and we had no debt, we had no loan, no mortgage, how much equity would we have in that house? We'd have 100 grand. Let's say we were unlucky. And a few months ago, 100% mortgages reared their ugly head again for the first time in a long time. Okay. 10, 12 years ago, it was Northern Rock, right? That were lending more than 100% mortgages. Okay. But let's say we got 100% mortgage. If we bought a home for £100,000 using 100% mortgage, the mortgage debt would be £100,000. If that was true, how much equity would we have in that house? 0. Okay. Now, if we got 120% mortgage, right? If that could have been gotten, and we had a home worth 100,000, but we've got debt of 120,000, but we've got no other assets and no other liabilities, how much is our equity? Exactly, minus 20, Alistair, minus 20. We'd be in negative equity. If you understand this concept, we're just using an example of a house. It's exactly the same with a business. There's just more moving parts. All the different categories of assets. Well, we've got cash. Well, we've got stock. Well, we've got vehicles. Well, we own buildings. Okay. And all these different types of liabilities, corporation tax, VAT, trade creditors. Don't worry about the labels for now, because we'll get into the more intricate labels later. They're all debt. When you net that down, you go, how much equity is in this business, right? And most business owners have negative equity. And if you just think about it on a personal level, if you've got negative equity in your home, most people can appreciate that's a bad thing. Why? Because the lender's calling the loan, you're in deep shit, right? You're going bankrupt, okay? So you want to have positive equity. You want equity. A different example to illustrate this point, Graham. Let me just flick up again. I'll flick down again. Oh, there's another page of people here now. Hello, hello. highball. I like that climbing sensor. Hello, hello. Oh, a few faces I've not seen for a while. Right, hello. So, and I've totally interrupted my track of thought. The other example would be net worth. So the Sunday Times Rich List. Hello, Georgia. The Sunday Times Rich List has just come out again recently. So let's take, I was going to say the most popular entrepreneur in the UK, but right now he's definitely not the most popular. In fact, he's probably the least popular. If I said name a famous billionaire in the UK entrepreneur, Obi, who would you name? Probably you'd name Richard Branson, right? So if somebody says Richard Branson is worth 4 billion, and it doesn't matter what the number is, let's just go with 4 billion now, Gary, okay? Hey, David and Chris, right? So let's say he's worth 4 billion. Does that mean he's got 4 billion in cash in his bank account? No, of course not. Doesn't mean that at all. What it means, oh, excuse me, clicked one too far. What it means, David, is that he's got assets. If he took his assets and paid off all his liabilities, he would be left with 4 billion. It's net assets. So on your P&L, you've got sales, less expenses equals your net profit. On your balance sheet, you've got your assets, but if you paid off your liabilities, you'd be left with net assets, also known as equity. Equity. Right? So here's the point of the game. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go with the third scorecard and then let's talk how they interrelate and then we'll be at Q&A, okay? So how does all this relate to a cash flow statement? How does this relate to a cash flow statement? Well, what have we spoken about there? We spoke about the example of a business with £100,000 in revenue on the P&L. Remember? £100,000 in revenue. But of that revenue, how much did it have in expenses? It had £80,000 in expenses, which means it had £20,000 in operating profit. And for those that are super financially literate, give me a little bit of poetic license here for simplification. But we got £20,000 worth of operating profit. Okay, it's Martin, it's you that I'm speaking to. Give me a bit of grace with this, just for ease of explanation for this first module. We've got £20,000. The cash flow statement represents cash. Cash, cash, cash. Cash is king. Cash, David, that goes into your bank account. Okay, Craig? So £20,000 goes into your bank account, Gary, as a result of your operations, right? Sales income of 100,000, expenses of 80,000 pounds. Therefore, you're left with 20,000 pounds in operating profit that turns into cash. Okay. But what would happen if all of a sudden in our business, we had a crisis and one of our vehicles broke down and we had to go and buy a new vehicle? Okay. And we had to go and buy a new vehicle and that vehicle cost us £15,000. And in the business we're in, we need a vehicle to get around. Okay. So we made a profit of £20,000, but £15,000 of it has to go out to get a new vehicle. If you bought a new vehicle, Alison, does it all show up on your P&L in 1 month? No, it doesn't, because you've taken cash in your bank account. And in the same way you could turn it into bricks and mortar, you just turn it into wheels and an engine. Okay, so it doesn't show up on your P&L that month as a £15,000 car purchase. You're not allowed to do that. That's called tax fraud. Okay, all right. So of your 20 grand cash coming in positive, you've had 15 grand go out to buy a new vehicle. But let's just pretend, Graham, because of what you were doing in the business, your bank have called in their loan or said, no, you need to clear your overdraft. Today, at the start of the month, you had an overdraft of 15 grand and they go, no, we're getting rid of your overdraft. Which basically means you have to put at least 15 grand in to clear the overdraft before the facility is removed. Well, hypothetically, Gary, you could have made a £20,000 operating profit in your business, 20 grand into your bank account, net, okay? But then if you've got 15 grand going out on investing cash flow and 15 grand going out in financing cash flow, the net of those three, 20 minus 15 minus 15, what's the net of those three? It's minus 10. So in this example, and don't worry, I'm going to bring it round and we're going to do questions. Okay, so just stay with me, because we're going to show you how this applies to your business. In this example, this business is making a profit. This business is making a profit. Okay, this could be a month, it could be a year, it could be a week, it could be a day. This business is making a profit, but in this example, it's making a profit and its balance sheet, it's making a profit, but its cash flow is negative. If these three simplified scorecards I just showed you were a month's worth of management accounts, the business has made a £20,000 profit, Alison. But Simon, its bank balance has gone down, Ashley, by £10,000 in that month. Turnover is vanity. Profit is sanity. But cash is king. What that means is, frankly, said in my own words, turnover don't count for shit. But the turnover serves a purpose. It's can you efficiently turn that into profit, okay? But profit doesn't count if it stays in somebody else's bank account. In every recession known to man, this next one will be no different. Loads of people that on paper are significantly wealthy and have got profits will go broke. You know why? Because they won't have enough cash to meet their needs. They'll have debts or loans be called in, overdrafts get pulled, etc. And they'll have debt obligations that they won't be able to service. And the bank will take their house. On paper, they could be a millionaire. A good friend of mine was a multi-millionaire, and a few recessions ago, the bank took his house because he couldn't afford the debt repayments. He had a business that made profit and he was a multi-millionaire on paper. He ran out of cash. The bank took his house, sold it for pennies in the pound because it was in the depths of a recession, and he went personally bankrupt. Turnover is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash and cash flow are king. These three scorecards are different, and they form the foundation of the 8 modules, okay? There's a P&L, there's a balance sheet, and there's a statement of cash flow. Over the remaining modules, we're going to go into these in more depth, in more detail. But at the base level, you need to understand that these 3 scorecards are the equivalent of your heart, your lungs, and your brain. They're all critical to the health and well-being of your business. And if you want your business to perform at a higher level, you need to have your heart, your lungs, and your brain working at optimal efficiency. And in order to do that, you need to be able to read the vital signs. When my daughter, my eldest one, not the one who you saw earlier, my eldest one was born, she had a diaphragmatic hernia. She was in intensive care. She needed emergency surgery when she was 3 years old. She was hooked up to a device that on a screen, it showed 7 or 8 different bits of data. They were all her vital signs: blood pressure, oxygen saturation levels. They constantly monitored those 7, 8, 9 metrics. And if any one of them, Simon, was slightly off kilter, they would make the necessary adjustment. And any one of those criteria being off affects the other ones. For example, if the oxygen saturation levels go down, the blood hasn't got enough oxygen, your heart has to beat faster to compensate. So all these, while these scorecards are different, they're all interrelated. And what's good for one can be bad for another. Everybody on this call knows a business that's revenue has gone up, 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 and up, and then they've gone broke because they overtraded. Too much sales is a bad thing at the wrong time. It's all relative to understanding these 3 scorecards. Understanding the P&L, the sales, expenses, and profit, and how that relates to the balance sheet, Rachel, the assets, the liabilities, and the equity, and how that relates to the statement of cash flow, operating cash, investing cash, financing cash. Final example, and then I'll go to questions. Just because it's perhaps the cleanest one, that because most people on this have bought property or their own home and therefore they can get their head around it. If you want to grow a property business, you need assets. You need homes to rent out if that's what you're doing. If you're renting out homes as a business, okay? So you need to buy homes. But if you don't buy enough homes, you're not going to get your revenue unless your profit's up. But if you buy too many homes, your debt service, your financing cash flow will be too negative and it'll use up your cash reserves and you'll go broke. So there's a constant balance between how much cash do we need to keep, in what ratio, when's the time to invest, because it'll give us more return later. Because somebody might just go, I'm just going to hold all the cash I ever can and not incur any debt. Okay, if you use debt leverage right, it gives you massive scale. If everybody in the country could only own their own home, if they bought it outright for cash, far fewer people would have a home. They'd all have to rent. Okay, but too much debt's a bad thing. You go, all of a sudden it becomes complicated. It comes back to these 3 scorecards. These are the foundational principles. So I'm going to go for Q&A. Just a quick heads up, a bit of a tease. In the next module on Monday, we're going to talk about the 3 critical people on your financial team. Okay. The reason why this is important is over these modules, you'll get more educated, Ashley. You're going to get smart, Simon, about how all this works. We're going to talk about borrowing money. We're going to talk about mergers and acquisitions. We're going to talk about a whole host of things. How to get your company out of trouble if it's in deep distress. We're going to talk about all kinds of applications. Excuse me. However, I want you to know it's essential that you're financially literate. You must take Warren Buffett's advice and study what you're going to learn in these financial masterclasses. But Ashley, I'm dead against you having to do the work. And there's actually 3 different financial roles that need fulfilling in your company. And these 3 roles can't be done by the same person. Well, let me take that back. They can be, it's just not that effective. In fact, it's very counterproductive and detrimental. So on the next module, we're going to talk about what these roles are, what the metrics of performance for these roles are, and more importantly, how you find good performers, A players that can do these jobs very cost efficiently. I wouldn't even know how to be a bookkeeper. I just want to understand it as a business owner at a strategic level, an investor level, so I can make strategic decisions about what to do with my company. I don't do the tax returns. I don't do the bookkeeping. Right? I've got people that do that, and you should too. And that's what we're going to talk about on Monday. But if you have those people, right, you've got to find those people, and some of you have got shitty people, and some of them need firing and replacing, right? And if that's and it's holding your business back, and that's what you're going to learn on Monday. But you need to have the base level financial literacy that you're getting through these masterclasses in order to be able to assess them properly, in order to make good decisions, in order to make sure they're doing good work so you can make good strategic decisions. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to stop the screen share now. If I could see my mouse, which somehow has disappeared. So let's try and do it this way. There we go. I'm going to stop my screen share and go back to video. There we are. Okay, so that's it, guys. That is the slide deck. Oh, a bit over. I said I'd do it in 30 and I've done it in 41, but we've got 19 minutes. So I'm going to look at the questions in the chat, and then I'm going to go to open Q&A. So quick run down the chat now. Is there a recording of the calls and downloads? Yes, there will be, Nick. We haven't put the page up yet, but we'll put it up within 24 hours, and we'll give you access to everything. Yeah, we'll give you access to everything. Thank you for answering the questions in the chat. Yeah, cash in, cash out, net chat. Informative session, very good. Brilliant. Yes, there'll be call recordings. Yeah, good. So over to you now, Ashley, Simon, Graham, Steve, Rachel, Claire. Sorry, Claire, I missed you earlier. Alison, Gary, who else we got? God, everybody. Georgia, Colin, John. Sorry, John, I didn't see you there earlier. What questions do you have? You can either put them in the chat if you're scared. God, loads of people are joining this call. Alex, Aaron, Kev, Jim, Harry, Barry, hello, Aaron, more. Either put your comments, questions in the chat now, or you can unmute yourself. I believe you've got the ability to unmute yourself. I enabled that function. Vanessa, Tom, Rebecca, Mike, Unmute yourself and ask away. This is your time. This is for you. Nick, go ahead.
So with the cash flow, it's all very well and good saying, oh, this is what the cash is going to, the business is going to make. It's a bit like Dragon's Den when they ask for 3 years worth of figures in advance. Seems a little bit ludicrous to me that they call out these numbers to within £1,000. So do you have some sort of spreadsheet that has your historic expenses and income? How do you create a meaningful cash flow statement projecting into the future?
This is a great question. And in fact, so I can be precise with the answer, let me just look one thing up really quickly, Nick. I'm going to refer to the modules that are coming up. Okay. So I just want to be clear about when we're doing it. So in module 4, okay, module 4. So that'll be a week on Monday. Nick, I'm gonna talk to you about how specifically I do that. Yes. So there's 2 points I want to make from what you've said. Okay. First one, let's talk about the Dragon's Den. How can you project 3 years into the future? Well, the fact is you can't, because forecasts are always that. They are from our imagination. What shrewd investors are looking for, though, is 2 things. One, is there plausibility to the plan? Okay. And this is actually going to be discussed in module 6 in more depth, but your financial success plan, is it plausible? Can we see it through? Because most people haven't thought about this stuff. And the fact is, Nick, if you can't have an intelligent conversation about it, if you can't make it work on paper so that people can ask you questions and you've got the answers because you've clearly thought about it, you've got a plan for how you're going to hit those numbers. If it's paper thin and the dragons see through it in 6 seconds, okay, if you can't make it work on paper, there is 0 chance it'll work in practice.
Okay.
0. So that's one part, i.e., so how do you do that? Like the budgeting, etc. We're going to talk about that in a later module. But the other thing that I think the dragons are looking for and smart investors are looking to do is they are actually assessing the competency level of the person in front of them. In other words, if you can't have the dialogue about a budget, if an accountant just prepared it for you, even if in theory it's a good budget, the fact that you are the MD, you are the owner, you are the CEO, you are the chairman of the business, and you don't understand how this works, you're on the stand and the investor is going, why the hell would I trust this person with my money? So while we're going to go into the intricacies in future modules, exactly how would I do that from a budgeting, forecasting point of view, but also in module 4, the financial analysis, how do I show it side by side to analyze the data, and how do I show the historic data? We're going to go through all that stuff in detail, and there's value to that. Above that, at a meta level, Nick, it's about having the financial literacy so that whether it be bankers, other investors, your own employees, trade suppliers, giving you credit, go, yep, this person knows what they're doing. Because, Martin Norbury, who's on this call, the scalability coach, very experienced, successful entrepreneur, Daddy ate them. I'm now being asked where the biscuits have gone. Martin knows, he can ask some questions and he knows your level of financial competence if you look shocked and ashen-faced as soon as he asks you to explain your different liabilities on your balance sheet, right? So it's about testing financial competence, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to, forgive me, Nick, I'm going to run to the next question to get as many in as possible. So who else has got a question? So thank you. Thanks, Nick. You can unmute yourself or you can put yourself in the chat. So unmute yourself and speak away. Vanessa, yeah, good. You're very welcome. And Barry, yep, I'll see you on Monday. What other questions do you have? I suspect you're on the side and you're all still here. Nearly everybody's still here. but nervous to
I've got
ask
one.
questions. So I know they're there. So I'm going to start picking on you. Simon, you've unmuted yourself. So
I have unmuted myself, Dan. Yeah, I suppose looking at the different sort of metrics here and the scorecards, is there, depending on the size of the business, how often you need to do these?
Yeah.
Is there fairly obvious sort of times where you go, okay, I need a P&L every month, or a balance sheet every month, or a cash flow every month, or is it weekly, annually?
Great question. So I'm going to give you an answer, but I'll try. There's a bit nebulous, and then I'll try and do it. I would say the more moving parts. So you could read that to say the bigger the business, the more frequently it needs to be measured. Said differently, the reason why you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the numbers to make sure that things are not unhealthy, moving in the wrong direction, so you can nip it in the bud quickly, and equally so that you can make sure that that things are adhering to the plan. And the more moving parts, the more employees, the more sites there are, there's more to lose. So the bigger the business, there's more to lose. So typically it's more frequently measured, right? Because if you're going to look at your data every hour, but your revenues are £2,000 a year, right? You're wasting a lot of time coming through the same old data and not a lot moves, right? But in big retail, right, especially in peak season, Christmas, etc., like they are looking at their sales by store and often by square foot, by product line in real time. And certainly there's updates to management every hour, because it's that important. They have the right stock and the right number of staff in the right stores at the right time, right? Said a more succinct way, for most small businesses, if you are not looking at these numbers properly, at least weekly, as in dialed in at a high level, at least weekly, and a deep dive at least monthly, I guarantee you're leaving a shitload of money on the table. Deep dive once a month, full set of management accounts, but weekly cockpit. That's what we do with our mastermind members. Is like, okay, what's the weekly cockpit? What's the dashboard where you're on the pulse of your business? Okay. And then simultaneously, every month, management accounts, whether it's your in-house accountant or financial controller, or whether it's from your accountant. Okay, I'm going into the balance sheets, I'm going into the P&L, I'm going into the statement of cash flow. So there's got to be a weekly pulse. If there's not, if you're a six-figure business owner, you're easily leaving 10, 20 grand on the table. If you're a seven-figure business owner, and then some as you are, you're probably leaving six figures on the table if you haven't got that rhythm. Does that help or scare you? Thanks, Simon. So other questions. All right, I've got Josh. I'll take it on the chat, and then I'll come back to them on the audio as well. So Josh says, what metrics would you say need to be in your weekly cockpits for your gyms? Josh is asking this because he's a gym owner. So Josh, and anybody, even if you're not a gym owner, even though Obi I know is a gym owner, or has a PT studio, map this over to your business. Here's what would be my weekly cockpit, Josh. And I'll try and make it generic for any business, but you can map it to gyms. At a simplistic level, I'm always measuring cash, and I'm always measuring how my current expenses for the month relate to my budget. Okay, so there's a cash measurement and there's a expenses measurement to keep us on track for profit. But the bulk of the weekly profit, Josh, for that type of business is focused on the revenues. Okay, so I've got a dashboard that tracks all my members' income. So I've got my current membership income, and I've got another line which is my budget target revenue, and therefore there's a gap. So my spreadsheet says if I've got target revenue of £100,000 and I've got £70,000 worth of monthly membership on the books, my gap revenue, Josh, is £30,000. And then, Simon, what I do, Mike, is I go into how do I bridge the gap? We're going to talk about this in another module. How do I bridge the gap? So then I've got layers of intricacy about how do I bridge the gap. So in your case, gym specific, but everybody here, it's just leads to sales pipeline metrics. So Josh, I've got metrics for how many appointments are booked. Okay. I've got metrics for what the conversion rates of those appointments are to sales. Okay. So I'm measuring, Josh, if I've got a 30 grand of gap to close, how much of that am I going to get from getting new members? And how am I going to do that? And how much of that am I going to get from selling more expensive packages to my existing members? Right? And then you might have products as well. If you're selling products in your location, which I don't know if you are or not, what's my product income going to be? What does it need to be to make up that gap, Josh? Okay. And then we're clear about who. So Nick's responsible for one of them. Oh, hello, Neil. Neelam's responsible for the products. Mike is responsible for the new members, and Paddy is responsible for renewing the contracts of the existing members. Right? So I'm very clear about this is the revenue target. Here's the revenue that we're at. Here's how we close the gap. And then there's constant dialogue every week about how are we going to close the gap? What are the different categories and who owns which category? Okay, that's Josh's question. One from Nick, and then I'll go back to keep posting in the chat, guys, or you can unmute yourself. Yeah, okay. So Nick says monthly management accounts can be misleading as expenses don't concur with revenues, e.g. 10 grand revenue in April, then paid the supplier 8K 2 months later. Both months would have a distorted P&L. Okay, Nick, this, some of you need to disregard this until we get into this in a future module. But the most basic level, Nick, if your books are being kept that way, you need to fire your bookkeeper. So perhaps we'll talk about this on Monday. The job of the bookkeeper is to match the expenses with to correlate the expenses with the appropriate revenues. So if you've got 10 grand of cost for sales that you make this month, but you don't pay your supplier for 60 days, that cost should show up in this month's management accounts. Okay. And in a lot of cases, it's not, which means it is misleading. You're absolutely right, Nick. It is misleading. You're correct, Josh. That's accrual accounting. And therefore, it's distorted, and then you make bad decisions. And that's a train wreck. There are a few hacks to get around that, right? As in, you look at a quarter's worth of P&L at once, or, but it's fundamentally, this is why you need to understand this stuff. Great example. And what I love, Nick, is that oh, well, that's distorted. Yeah, your job is to understand this stuff so you can either hire the right people or communicate to your team so they make sure that things are documented in the right way. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Neelam. Okay, Graham, are there ideal ratios between operating cash, investing cash, and financing cash? This is a great question. Okay. I'm in favor of growing revenues, but the skill, and it's in a book over here, it's called, in fact, I can reach it. It's within arm's length. This is the genesis of this particular book. Actually, I've lost myself on the screen now. Let me check. You guys can see my video. I go full screen. It's the genesis in this book. Basically says you want to grow revenues, but you want to grow profits more quickly than you grow revenues. But actually, you want to grow operating cash flow more quickly than you grow profits. So more simplistically for now, because we're only one part through an 8 module course, okay? More simplistically, I'm in favor of growing cash ad infinitum, okay? And the amount of cash you hold, it's appropriate what that ratio is as per your operating expenses, as an example. Okay. So, it was in the Telegraph a month or so ago. Most businesses are in a panic because it was something like 80%. Martin, you probably know this. I just don't recall it. So share it in the notes if you recall it. Something like 80% of the 5 million small businesses or limited companies in the UK have less than 2 months worth of cash in their account. So if they didn't get loans, if they don't fix their income, they'll go broke in 2 months. And that's very common. But just because it's common, it's probably the exact opposite, Georgia, of what you need to do. You probably want to have 6 months worth of cash. Bill Gates famously said in the 80s that one of his first goals for Microsoft was to have a year's worth of operating expenses in the bank account. Why? He said he wanted to focus on growing Microsoft, not panicking and scrabbling to do stupid shit in a panic just to meet payroll. So there are ratios, Graham, of kind of cash, but it's not just cash, it's equity. And think about this. Your operating cash flow needs to service any debt repayments and any investment needs. So an example, to go back to the point, let's say we have a house rented out and we've got operating cash flow and we want to buy another house. Okay, well, we need enough operating cash flow to allow us to buy that house, or at least put down the deposit and service the mortgage payment with room left over. Because if we don't have enough operating cash flow, right, the only way that we can stay in business is to either borrow money or sell off our assets. So operating cash flow is king. That's what you need. Because if the business core operation isn't creating surplus cash, allowing you to pay down debt or invest in other assets, the only way you can get other assets is to borrow money or sell off the assets you've got, which means it's unsustainable. Okay, so that's it for now. Yeah, Martin says the figure was 85% have less than 2 months worth of cash. Yeah. If this goes on for more than 5 months, only about 1% will have enough cash to continue without radical reduction. Yep, great. And so yes, Neelam, future modules we'll be doing more about ratios. So yeah, so look, this is why. So here's the summary from this. In a recession, 2 types of people thrive. 1, people with money. Why? In the short term, assets become cheaper. The property market will get suppressed. If you want to go and buy a car right now, you're going to get a hell of a deal, right? So your cash goes further. Cash is king. But the second type, person that thrives, are the people that can adapt, the skilled. Because you can have a lot of money, okay? But if you're stupid with that money, it'll bleed away. If you make bad investments, bad choices, you'll still run out of money. Plenty of people go broke in boom times, okay? So if I had to choose between cash and the brains about how to financially literacy and business skills, I'd choose the latter every day of the week. Because if you're financially literate, you're smart, you can figure out how to get the money, how to position the money and make a return on investment. Back to the Dragon's Den example from earlier. They want to invest in people. The investors want to invest in people that they know are going to be smart with their money, that are going to make them a return. That is what this course is about. Yeah, great. Thank you, Martin. I agree with you. And you and I sing from the same hymn sheet on this. Too many business mentors give people what they want, not what they need. This should be mandatory viewing for all businesses. Thank you. Yeah, it is. They sell them, oh, grow your business, grow your sales, and then it'll all be okay. No, it won't. Turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, cash and cash flow is king. You can grow rapidly and go broke even quicker. Okay? Thank you, Nick. Every business owner in the UK needs your book. Thank you. They make great birthday and Christmas presents. Yeah, global domination for Dan. Thank you, Simon. Good. So, other comments, questions? We're at the hour, but I'll run for another 5 minutes just because we still got 80% of the people that start this course still on it. We're coming back at you on Monday, but if you've got a burning question you want to ask me, now is the time. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Georgia, you've unmuted yourself. You're in the hot seat. Away you go.
Oh, thanks. You've made this sound amazingly simple, and it's something that's confused me for years. So thank you very much. What's the catch? Is it this? Do I just fill out this information every month? Like, are these scoreboards this easy to use in reality? Good question. So I think that if you understand the first principles, you'll start to be able to read the map. Okay. Mm-hmm. In practice, and this is what goes on in my private mastermind meetings, they bring their balance sheets, their P&Ls, their cash flows, etc., to the meetings, and then we discuss it. Because, as I said, I'll often in those meetings go back to these first principles, and people get it. So I am going to say it's that simple, but equally, to be fair,
people get into the nitty gritty and they get lost in it, and they get lost in the different terms. So there are other terms which does in reality make it more complicated. But you'll often find that when I'm sat down in a private mastermind meeting, I'll just come back to, okay, what is that? Oh, I've got my accountant says I've got an overdrawn director's loan account. What does that mean? And then I'm going to have a tax liability. And all of a sudden you go, whoa. And I expect a few people in here have had conversations with their accountants about an overdrawn director's loan account. Okay. And I'm on Zoom, but not on my iPad. Otherwise I'd draw up a quick sketch as an example. We're going to go, okay, what is a director's loan account? It's typically when a business loans money to the director, right? So if you've got an overdrawn director's loan account, it means that you've taken money from the business, but it's not been shown on your income tax yet. It's not been dividended out to you. So it's a loan. Okay. Well, if at the end of the year, your accountant comes to do that, they come to say, okay, Georgia, let's give Georgia this dividend of 50 grand or whatever the number is. Okay. Let's give Georgia the 50 grand. The company's got to have the profits to be able to do that. Dividends can't be paid unless the company's got the profits. And yet sometimes if Georgia's taking, I know you wouldn't do this, Georgia, you're very disciplined in this area, but if Georgia had taken 50 grand out of the business and the company only had profits of £10,000, the account would be going, oh my God, Georgia, you've got an overdrawn director's loan account. And people panic, go, what does that mean? Well, it's simple. It means you've got a liability. You owe 50 grand to the business. And if you don't pay it back, you're going to get taxed on that. Right? And then you say that in a private mastermind person, and you walk it through, and you walk them through an example, and you draw up a simple balance sheet like the one I did, and just put director's loan account on it. And, and then people go, oh, I get it. Where we get lost is when all of a sudden we've got 1,000 different transactions occurring in our business, and they all interact. We get overwhelmed. When for everybody on this call, actually, you don't need to know about every single transaction. You just need to be able to read the summary in the management accounts. And then when somebody flags up, oh, we got a problem with this one thing, you have to go, okay, which scorecard is it? Okay, within that scorecard, which part of that scorecard does it relate to? Okay, now let's have a conversation about that detail, rather than just be overwhelmed and then shoot from the hip and make stupid ass decisions, which happens all the time because business owners just get scared. And accountants, and I'd say if any of them were on the call, like honestly, it's a different fucking breed. It blows my mind at how bad they are as a breed at communicating in plain English to clients. So anyway, you got me on my soapbox there, Georgia, but does that answer your question? Okay, good. Okay. Oh, wow. I've started up a revolt now. 9 more messages. Okay, good. Thank you. Looking at figures over 30 years, cash flow got clear. Say good. Thanks, Neon. My accountant miscategorized wages that I specified in zeros director's loan for months. Yeah, good. I mean, that's a rookie error. But by the way, just to challenge the person that said that, if they make a mistake, whose fault is it? It might be theirs, but it's also probably yours for not feeding it back. Right? Okay. Martin says, I did this type of exercise with a mastermind group of multi-million-pound businesses, and they moaned this was too simple. But that's also vanity, as they were more embarrassed that they really didn't know about it and were too embarrassed to admit it. I agree, Martin. I've got no problem with looking stupid, right? Guys, these skills that we're learning here, Ashley, have done more for my personal wealth than anything else, more than any marketing trick or tactic, any skill. You've got to learn how money works, right? People complain about the rich bankers and the finance industry. Well, why do you think they're rich? The people that run the hedge funds, why do you think they're rich? They understand money and how it works. They understand the scorecards. They understand how to assess companies and which to invest in and which to short the stock of, right? Yeah, get the basics right and you'll learn to make the right decision. Okay, good. Amazing feedback. Thank you. All right, guys. So I'm afraid I've got to cut and run now because I've got to get into my next call for the day. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I will put up the recording and you'll have access to it. Other than that, the next one's on Monday. And as a reminder, we are talking about the 3 critical people on your financial team. and why these 3 roles can't be one person. We're going to talk about the roles, but more importantly, where to find them and how to hire them. So thank you all for now. Be well.